Okay, and this panel is being moderated by Margarita Longoria, and I will let Margie or Margarita introduce herself and introduce the panelists, and let them talk about their books. So, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Margarita Longoria. I am the editor-anthologist of Living Beyond Borders, Growing Up Mexican in America. It's an anthology of short stories, essays, poems, and a couple of comic strips defining the Mexican-American experience. And I'm going to be moderating this panel today. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and say a little bit about their recent book.
Hi, everyone. I am Olugbemisola Rhuday-Perkovich. I am the author of Operation Sisterhood, which I don't have in my hand. I have some stickers here that you can see. It's a book about a girl named Bo who is from the Bronx and is very happy living in the Bronx with her mom, and suddenly is thrown into a new neighborhood and a new family with a lot of music, a lot of sisters, a lot of animals, and a lot of fun, I think, also.
Hi, I'm Hilda Burgos, and my latest book is the middle grade novel, Miosotis Flores Never Forgets. It's about Miosotis, who's in the 6th grade, and she really, really wants a dog. So she makes a deal with her dad that if she gets certain grades, particularly an A in science, that she can get a dog by the summer. And this is really stressful for her because science is not her thing. But then she finds out that her older sister, who's in college, is sort of in a disturbing situation, and she needs some help, but she doesn't want any help. So, Miosoti's just trying to figure out how can she help her sister without breaking her promise to not tell anybody, and can she help her, and is she a terrible person because she still really wants her dog?
Hi, I'm Karina Yan Glaser. This is my newest book, A Duet for Home, which is set in the Bronx. It's inspired by work I did for many years in New York City shelters for families who are experiencing homelessness. And in this book, there are 2 perspectives. Both kids, like in Hilda's books, are in 6th grade. And one is just entering the shelter system, and one has been living in the shelter for over 3 years, and it's about friendship and music and standing up for what you want and what you deserve and for sharing dreams. So I hope you like it.
Hi, I'm Alex Gino. My book takes place far, 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 far away, all the way in Staten Island. And it's about 2 non-binary kids who want to get a statue of Alice Austin put up at Staten Island Borough Hall. And it's filled with queer community and family and mentors, and I like it a lot. I hope you do too.
We're the Books Imitate Art panel. So I want to ask a couple of questions about your books. Are these books, what kind of a kid were you? And are these books kind of semi-autobiographical?
I don't have to start. Do you want to start?
Sure.
Alex?
I'm not at all distracted by the ongoings. I can talk. I can think. So yes, very, very, very much so. So Alice Austin was an early photographer, and there's a ferry named after her. She's known on Staten Island. But what I didn't know growing up, and most people didn't know at the time I was growing up, is that she was queer. She was a lesbian, and she had a partner for over 50 years. And I found that out when I was in college. And in fact, in my research, I found out that she lived in the same building that I did. So that's what I did for Sam, my main character. I put them in the same building that I grew up in. And I thought about some of the people who used to live in my building, and I made them all queer. And I put them all in this building. So it's sort of like the queer fan fiction of what my life could have been like growing up.
That's awesome. I can't believe that you live in the same building. That's awesome. Yeah, I think, all of our books probably have elements of being autobiographical. For me, in this book is probably, one of the main characters is probably the most like me out of all the books I've written. And so it's set in 6th grade, and when I was in 6th grade, I was coming home from gymnastics practice, and my dad picked me up, which was very unusual. Like, my dad never picked me up from anything. And he picked me up and he said, I'm moving to China tomorrow, and so I wanted to pick you up so I could say goodbye. And in this book, one of the main characters, her dad suddenly passes away. And so I had to sort of go back to my 6th grade self and sort of think about all those feelings of losing a parent suddenly, and sort of thinking about that as I wrote my book. So yes, there are a lot of elements of things that I experienced as a middle schooler that I write in all my books, but particularly this one.
Is it semi-autograph, biograph, whatever. This book is probably less autobiographical than my first 2 books, but they're all I was born and raised in New York City in Washington Heights, and my first 2 books take place in Washington Heights. This one takes place in the Philadelphia area, which is where I've been living for over 30 years now. The character, like my other characters in my other books, is Dominican American, like me. And she doesn't really like school that much, which I did, but one of the things that I sort of drew from my childhood with this book is that I was a kid who really noticed what I thought were injustices. And when I saw kids sort of not being treated well in school and stuff like that, and there's one part in this book where Miyosotis' dad says to her, "Oh, you have to be twice as good as a white American in order to be given half as the credit," and she thinks, "Oh, blah blah blah, Dad's just being old and melodramatic," but then she sort of starts to see that is actually true, that there are certain privileges that some people have and that others don't. And that was something that I know that I noticed when I was a kid, because it's all around us, unfortunately, and we can see these things.
I think for me also, there are definitely elements that are autobiographical. There are 4 sisters in Operation Sisterhood, and I think there's a little bit of me in each of the sisters. They're musicians, they're in a band. I used to play a lot of instruments, none of them that very well, but I used to play a lot of instruments as a kid and be in band. And my sister and I and another pair of sisters were always talking about how we were going to form a band and be really famous, but we just kept making plans and never really became a band like the girls in the book. They have adventures around New York City, which was a big thing for me growing up. And their parents, they're Jamaican American, they're Nigerian American. Their family is multicultural, multi-ethnic, like mine. And the parents have them do reports and presentations that my parents definitely had me do when I was a kid. So even when I was in middle and high school, if I wanted to go to a party or something, my dad would have me write a little essay about why it was a good idea for me to go to this party. And so there are a lot of elements of the book that are from my life.
In Living Beyond Borders, there's a lot of stories that are autobiographical, so I love that about this. Okay, growing up, what kind of a student were you? Were you quiet? Were you a rebel, a shy bookworm? And how did that impact your middle grade experience when you guys were in middle school? Anybody?
Hilda.
Oh, you want me to start? Okay. So yeah, I was a shy bookworm, definitely. And I was also kind of young because, I was born at the end of the year, so I was already young. And then I skipped 7th grade. So in 8th grade, I was the youngest kid in my class. And I think that did sort of impact so I had basically one really good friend. And I guess there were two reasons for that. One was that I was kind of shy and I didn't really like being around big crowds of people. And then the other is that, since I was younger than everybody, it was a little bit harder to relate to the other kids. But I always loved school, and I loved reading, and I loved learning, and I was just, I was kind of nerdy, basically.
Oh, I was a total bookworm. I was very much a weirdo, but unlike Sam, I didn't have access to language and things to figure out how to talk about how I was a weirdo, and I had a best friend, but we weren't the same kind of weirdos. So yeah, this is again the wish fulfillment of what my bookish childhood was like.
I was definitely nerdy. Definitely a bookworm. I moved a lot in my childhood, so I went to a different school in every grade, and my books, like every time we moved, I would take all of my books with me. They were like friends to me. And, but I was also, I guess, a rebel in a sense sometimes too. I was quiet, but I was very often making deals with my teachers at school to like do alternate assignments other than the ones that I was given. And a lot of times those were writing assignments because I did like to write because I was so bookish. So I would sort of offer to write something instead of doing what I was supposed to do. So yeah, it was a little bit of both.
Oh my gosh, I love that you're a rebel, Bemi. Bemi and I had similar childhoods. I also moved like almost every year. And yeah, like that thing as like books as friends is definitely something that relates to me. And because I moved so often, like, I don't know about you, Bemi, but did you like always go to the library first?
Yeah.
Like go to the library, like hide there, like eat your lunch there,
Yeah.
and like, because books were familiar.
Yeah.
And now I see that my own kids do the same thing. Like my younger kid, like carries all of the books, like your book and your books, like in their bag, every day to school, and it's like so heavy. And I always tell them like, maybe you can leave some at home, and they're like, no, like I need these, like these are my friends, like these are so important to me. So I definitely felt that growing up too.
Yeah.
I was a wild child rebel, but I was a bookworm. I've always been a wild child, but I've always been a bookworm too.
You might
So,
introduce. Oh, I just wanted to introduce your child to ebooks. That might be a little lighter.
They have a Kindle, but it's not the same. They need like the physical. Yeah.
For Hilda, I loved your story. When writing your book, did you research dogs, or are you a dog lover? Is that why you picked a book to write about like a dog? Well, not necessarily about a dog, but like the dog has a very central part.
Yeah, the dog is pretty central. I never had any pets growing up. I grew up in an apartment, and we weren't allowed to have pets, so I never had any. And so unlike Miyosotis, who's like this dog expert and a natural born dog lover, I was not as a kid. But 10 years ago, I got a dog for the first time ever, and because my husband says I obsess over everything. I have to research everything. And so I did a lot of research about getting a dog, and I got a rescue dog. And so I learned a lot about rescue dogs. And in this book, she helps her neighbor take care of rescue dogs. So some of the dog characters in the book have some personality traits that my own dog has and that some of my friends' dogs have. But I also did additional research because, one dog in the book came from an abusive situation, so I researched abused dogs. There's a dog who lost its person, and so I researched, do dogs mourn, and how do they mourn, and and then I talked at length to my vet about, what happens if a dog eats chocolate, and what do you do about that? So anyway, so there's always, even if you think you know about something, you always need to research. And so I felt like I was sort of a dog expert before I started to write the book, but then I did a ton more research, and I'm still not an expert.
Alex, Your book taught me so much. It made me go and research Alice Austen myself. Tell us a bit about your research and what guided you to tell this story.
Sure. So, like I said, I knew Alice's name growing up because I used to take the Alice Austen ferry. And when I was in college and I had figured out that I was queer, I started to do some of the background research on queer history that wasn't shown to me in classrooms. And I was reading a book about lesbian history and I saw Alice Austen's name. And I said, what? And I got the book, the same book that Sam in the book gets. And I was reading along. By the way, if anyone knows about queer history, Alice Austen's partner's name was Gertrude. Yeah, Gertrude Stein, right? Gertrude and Alice. This is Alice and Gertrude. And she was well off for most of her life, and she has the Staten Island, there's the Alice Austen home on Staten Island, but when she was older, I was reading through, she moved to 141 St. Mark's Place, which is my building. I'm like, that, I can sing that like a 4-year-old because I learned it when I was 4. And in fact, I put that into the book. Like, it's 141 St. Mark's Place, apartment 4A. Like, that's how you learn your address when you're 4. And it just sat in the back of my head as this like wild, cool anecdote. And then I met Sam and TJ writing a story about trying to come up with outfits for the prom when you're queer and non-binary. And when lots of fancy clothes is either boy clothes or girl clothes. So I know that's not exactly what you asked, but it all comes together. These characters, I was like, Sam is the one who's gonna find this out. Sam and TJ are gonna take this information and they're gonna run with it. And that was really, so much of the research was just a redoing of the research I had already done in college.
It was amazing. Karina, A Duet for Home was such a beautiful story. Tell us where this story came from.
Sure. So right out of college, I graduated a little early, so I found myself like rushing to find a job, and sort of came across this posting for like a strange job posting for an organization that worked for families that were homeless in New York City. And I applied for it, I got it, and then they knew I couldn't start until school was over. And then I went on the first day, and they had no idea who I was. I was like, I swear I got a job offer. It was because the CEO had like this brain injury. He was the one who interviewed me and hired me, so I got in and I had no idea what I was doing. But I stayed there for many years and learned so much about sort of what kids go through when they're living in the homeless shelter system in New York City. It's just really rough. They get bused many hours to go to their original school that they were at in an attempt to sort of create some consistency in schooling, but a lot of times they're up at 5 in the morning, waiting outside the shelter, waiting for a bus to pick them up, travel 2.5 hours to their school, then do the opposite commute coming back. And when I was working there, I was also there was a policy that came out. This was in the early 2000s, and there was a policy where the government was really looking to move families out of transitional housing really quickly and into permanent housing. But the way they did it was sort of unsafe because a lot of the permanent housing that was available was just really shady landlords, like very unsafe conditions, no running water, like just really horrible and far away from public transportation, just really not sustainable. So that was something that I worked on a lot. That's just working on trying to get that policy, thrown out so families wouldn't have to live through those situations. And that comes up in this book, that policy, because I think about, we were able to defeat the policy, but there were 2 years where kids were living that reality, and that's a lot of kids. There are a lot of kids who are in the shelter system, and that affected them very much. So I talk about that in this book. This book has been in my mind for many years, so I'm very happy it's finally out. So, but it really has been in the works for about 2 decades.
Wow. Thank you. So, Operation Sisterhood was such a delightful read. What was your drive behind this story?
Thank you. I think first, I used to like to read a lot of fun family stories when I was a kid, and the ones that I read never featured Black families. So I knew that I wanted to write a fun Black family story, like all the fun Black families that I knew. And I did draw a lot from some of my own family experiences, and I had a lot of experiences working with organizations like Karina with kids around the city in the Bronx and Washington Heights and in Harlem, and taking them on trips and adventures for literacy projects. So I put a lot of that in. And then I was thinking about how, while I was doing that work, I feel like Black and brown children especially are pressured to be other than who they are, or to feel that they have to be more than who they are. And so I really wanted to write about these girls just feeling like what Langston Hughes calls free within themselves, free within ourselves is in the essay. So I wanted to write about that. And then I started the book around 2012, and then put it down for a while. And then as I was really writing, we were going through a lot of really hard times in the country and then in the city with the height of the pandemic. And so it was hard to write a joyful book during some really sad and painful times. So I really had to think a lot about what I wanted to give readers and how I wanted to celebrate the city and celebrate the sense of community that we have in the city that sometimes people in other parts of the country don't really know or see.
That's beautiful. And you're right. We, growing up, we didn't have stories like this. And that's, okay, so I'm a librarian, and also in my real life. And I'm a big believer and a big pusher of diverse books, and books that feature culturally relevant literature and just different types of the way we live. And so why do you think that's important in literature? Why do you think we need to push this in schools, and why libraries need to be colorful? Anyone can take this question.
Well, I'm very disheartened a little bit by like what's going on around the country, and a lot of the recent like book bannings, or even just sort of like soft book bannings where librarians just won't stock books that feature diversity or themes that they don't find appropriate. So I'm just grateful for you and all the work you do, and librarians all over the country who are really looking to diversify their collections. I think it's so important. You know, when I was telling Alex just now that like one of my kids, you know, they read your books and they saw themselves in the books. And like, if we don't have those books where kids can see themselves in the stories, it makes them feel like they're irrelevant, or that their stories don't matter, or they don't matter. And, you know, I think we all feel strongly about making sure that every kid can read books that feature them as the main character. And I think probably for all of us, that was something that was lacking in our own childhood. And I think that's probably why we feel so passionate about it now.
Absolutely. Seeing yourself in a book is a way of being real. Seeing yourself in a book is a way of feeling valid. And I'm going to go further and say that it is also vital for folks who are not marginalized to see marginalized people in books for the sake of the marginalized folks. Because Black kids, brown kids, queer kids are at serious risk of violence. Violence from self-harm, and seeing yourself in a book mitigates that, and violence from others. And seeing someone in a book means that when you encounter someone in the real world, you have a connection point. And that's like been one of my biggest things with Melissa, which was my first book, was about a trans girl. And if someone reads that book and then 10 years later they're drunk one night and they see someone they think is trans, and so they're like working from their PBR brain, right? What they see is someone kind of like someone they read a book about. And that's no big deal. And so everybody goes home and nothing happens. And that's like, I still get goosebumps thinking about nothing happening.
Yeah, I think like just as the way for me, books were a way to sort of find my way through the world and figure out what I thought and who I wanted to be. That's for all of us. And so like being able to encounter each other in stories helps us develop empathy, helps us develop community, helps us to think about the kind of world we want to have and the kind of world we want to make, and think about both the challenges and the joys and how we're going to live. So I just can't imagine how that could not be a good thing.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything everybody here said, and I'm probably the oldest person here, and I did not see any kids like me in books when I was growing up. The first time I read a book about anyone who was similar to me was when I was an adult, and I read How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by Julia Alvarez, and I thought, oh my goodness, here are 4 Dominican sisters, and we're 4 Dominican sisters, and they live in New York, and we live in New York, and it was just so exciting. And, you know, all my sisters had to read it. We all bought copies, and we were just so excited about this. And we were all adults by this point, and it's just really good to see yourself in a book. And it's also, I mean, I still loved reading when I was a kid, even though I didn't see myself in any books, because I also love learning about other people. Although it seems that all the people I was learning about were very similar. Now that I'm an adult and I'm reading like all of these fabulous books, and I mean, it's just really great to open my mind up even more and to learn about more people who are different from me. And I would hope that other people in the world would do that too, because yeah, as people have mentioned, things are a little bleak these days, and books can really brighten that.
Books should be mirrors and windows into our communities, into our cultures, and that's how we learn about each other, and that's how, I know like I said, as a librarian, I make sure that my bookshelves where I serve are very diverse and colorful, and that's why books like these are very important. So thank you so much for writing them. So I'm gonna ask kind of a funny question. Are you a happily ever after person or a tragic doom person? Alex.
Do you mean in my writing or in my life?
In real life.
There's a difference.
In my head, I am a tragic doom person, which is why I write middle grade. If I were to write YA, I would spiral down right with the book, and if, like whatever, it would just be bad. But I like writing hopeful, but I don't so much live there.
I definitely am a happily ever after person. I mean, I think, middle grade definitely goes in that direction pretty much 99% of the time. I just like happy endings. Like when I read a book, I don't want to feel at the end like something horrible is going to happen, or I don't know. That's why I think I always read children's books rather than adult books.
Yeah, I feel the same way, although I guess I wouldn't really call myself a happily ever after person. I'd call myself a hopefully ever after person, because I don't like sad endings. I don't like to feel down and depressed, which is why I don't read books for grown-ups. But I do feel like I don't like an unrealistically happy ending. I just like to feel like, okay, this kid is going to be okay. They're going to face more challenges in their lives, but they've got the strength and the resilience and the support, and they're going to be fine. And then I can feel good about closing the book then.
I think I'm similar. I'm a little bit of both in real life, happily ever after and tragic doom. And I think with my writing and reading, like I just think that our lives have both, and our lives have joy and pain and challenges and highs and lows. And I think reading and writing really helps me, and I hope with my books helps readers see that we can get past those tragic doom times and moments, and we can have joy, and it's okay to experience all of these
Right.
things. Like, that's life.
That is life. If you could tell middle grade you one thing, what would that be? Middle grade you.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I guess what I would say is to go ahead and try new things and take some risks, because I think that you can learn a lot that way, and it's okay. It's okay if things don't turn out exactly how you expected them to, but you put yourself out there and you tried, and sometimes things can be really good when you do that. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself.
Some kids are really popular in junior high school. Those kids peak in junior high school. You haven't peaked yet. It's going to be years. You're going to peak.
I mean, I have 2 middle schooler kids right now. So I mean, like, parenting them has like brought me back to like how hard those years are. And I guess to tell middle school me, I would just say, you know, like, keep that goal in mind, like what you want to do, where you want to go, and just keep focused on that no matter what's happening around you.
This is a hard one. I think that the people, I would tell that me, like, your friends, the people you have, you will have the rest of your life, that you can develop friendships with people and you will find your people no matter what. It's okay. You'll find your people.
We're going to do one last question before we take some audience questions. So start thinking of your questions for the panel. Who are some of your favorite writers and what inspires you?
I'm going to answer because I don't have an answer. I have so many favorite writers. I get like in a panic with this question. But I'm inspired by just everyday life. I'm inspired by the kids that I've taught, the people that I meet. I'm inspired by conversations that I overhear on the subway. I like to work in the libraries a lot throughout the city. I'm inspired by the city. I'm inspired by memories. I had a writing teacher once talk about when you're writing for children, that you're remembering all of the ages that you've been. So I'm inspired a lot by my own childhood and by my daughter's experiences. Everything.
The favorite writer question is a really difficult one. And I feel like I can never answer that because there are just so many, you know, there's so many great ones. I mean, I would definitely, and I mentioned Julia Alvarez before, and, you know, I would definitely say that she's one of my favorites, but there are just so many great writers out there and so many great books. And, you know, and like I'm also, in terms of my writing, I guess I draw inspiration from a lot of things, and one of those things is reading a really great book, you know, and seeing how this author told their story in this very inspiring way, and thinking, oh, I have all these stories inside of me, and I'd like to tell my stories in an inspiring way as well. So that's, yeah, so reading great books is an inspiration.
Well, some of my favorite authors would be Bemi, Hilda, Alex. I mean, there are just so many. I mean, we really are in just like a time period where there's so many amazing writers out there putting out really quality books. I feel very honored to like have books on the shelves with other people like them. Also, Rita Williams Garcia is another one of my favorites, who's going to be here, so I'm excited about that. And in terms of inspiration, I mean, the city, honestly, is like one of my biggest inspirations. I love New York City so much. From books is how I learned about the city. I grew up in California, and I learned about New York City from reading it in books, and always wanted to move here and live here. And I think the city is amazing.
I'm going last, which given me enough time to either narrow it down or count up to 3. I'm not sure which way I'm going, but I'm going to mention Mike Jung because he writes about friendship and he writes about boys who talk about their feelings. I'm going to mention Kelly Yang because she has already written well about the pandemic, and I don't understand how. And Kyle Lukoff. I've been waiting for peers, and he's now exceeded me, and I love it. As for inspiration, more than anything else, it's when I go to school visits and when I go to classrooms and I see that kids really are talking the ways that they can. And they really do have conversations about things that we didn't. And they really do talk about what different sexualities are and what different words mean and what it means to, commit a microaggression and how you can actually apologize and recover. And they really do actually talk about this stuff. Maybe not in front of you, but they do. And that's amazing.
Does anyone have any questions for us up here on the panel? Don't be shy.
He's not going backwards. He's just standing there. Thank you.
Okay, there's a mic right there in the middle if somebody has a question. Anything? No?
We'll tell you what we had for breakfast.
It's true. Talk about anything.
That's a good question. Can you hear me? I think it's too tall. Fine. I don't even know if it's on. Do you have a favorite library that you go to?
Favorite library.
I have a lot of favorites. Seward Park down on the Lower East Side is one of my favorites. They have or they used to, I don't know if they do now because of the pandemic, but tea and biscuits on Tuesday afternoons. And just a lot of different things. The George Bruce Library on 125th Street is another one of my favorites. The kind of newer Battery Park City one that's right on the water. The County Cullen Library in Harlem. I could go on. Oh, the Bronx Library Center, the big Bronx Library Center, the library in Highbridge. I love the branches all around the city. Clinton Hill in Brooklyn.
I don't live. I was just gonna say I don't live in New York anymore, so I go to my local libraries. I think there are 3 near me that I go to.
Yeah, I mean, the New York City libraries are all amazing. I mean, the booth is right there if any of you are looking for a library card. I mean, I think the max you can check out is 50 books on one card. And when my kids, especially when they were younger, we would max out our card regularly. Then I got them both their own cards, and it was a logistical nightmare, which one is on which card and what's late. But, I mean, we're just so lucky to have such a great library system here. My local library is County Cullen, which I love, which is right across the corner is the Schomburg, which is gorgeous. Yeah, we're a huge supporter of libraries.
I grew up at the St. George branch, which I do love. And I will also say that there are kind of cool libraries outside of New York City.
What?
The library in Northampton, Massachusetts is beautiful. I'll say that.
My favorite library is my library, where I'm the librarian at Mission High School in Mission, Texas.
I do have to say that school libraries are also so incredible. I mean, all of us travel and visit all these schools, and that's just amazing. What librarians are doing in their libraries, it's just beautiful.
I want to change my answer because my favorite library was the PS29 library because that's where I found Shel Silverstein. That's where I found out that there were just tons and tons of books there, and you could check them out without having to intervene. There didn't have to be another adult involved.
Sure.
You could just get your yeah.
Libraries are beautiful. Anybody else have a question?
Hi. I was wondering if, since you all write contemporary, what your thoughts on about all the book banning that's been going on and the effect it's been having on kids and society and what you'd like to see happen.
I think
Fine.
we're all against it.
It is terrible. It is tragic. It is ill-planned. It is what it is it's someone who is a group of people who are so afraid and so unable to handle something that they don't know, that they would rather act as if it doesn't exist, rather than to provide their children with the tools to be different than them. It also really sucks to be in a position where one's very existence is said to be unacceptable for young consumption. Not consumption, but awareness. There's no age before which it is appropriate to be compassionate. And it is a tidal wave that we are fighting right now, and in the long run, it is going. This is a place where I am hopeful. It's going to be a losing battle because people don't like to be told that they can't find things out, and people don't like to. I just think I hope it will fail.
It will.
It's really harmful. It's harmful and it's heartbreaking, but I think it will fail, and I think that it's an attempt to keep us from thinking and keep our children from thinking, and it's just incredibly harmful. But I think that I'm hopeful because there are all of us here. There are kids who know better and who understand that they're being manipulated and that it is truly damaging, and who want to create a better world and know that that's not the way.
Yeah, the hopefully ever after person in me definitely agrees that it will fail, but it's still very, very sad that it's happening at all, and that it's going to inflict a lot of damage before it fails, unfortunately. Right. But all we can do is keep fighting the good fight.
I'll also add that the books that were not banned 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. We all said that we didn't have books like that we needed growing up. So the fact that they're being banned means that they exist.
Yeah, and I think also it's a scary time for teachers and librarians who are, they're really the people who are getting a lot of this feedback from parents who, I don't know, it's really hard to watch. So if there's any way that us as communities of support can support teachers and librarians in keeping your shelves diverse and welcoming to everyone, we are always willing to help in any way we can.
As a librarian and an educator in Texas, it's crazy. But I'm lucky that we have the Texas Library Association, and really all the associations, the library associations in the country, all have something in place that have been fighting against these bans, which is why it's not as bad. I mean, it could be worse. It could be, but there's a lot of people fighting for our books and for our kids to be able to have access to knowledge and information, and for nobody to be able to tell them that they can't. So we're fighting. The librarians of the world. We are. Any other questions?
Thank you. Those were great.
All right. Can you hear me? Thank you so much again to our panelists. I just want a round of applause. I want to mention that they'll all be back by the book tent, and you can purchase all of their books. You can meet them, get the books signed, say hi, ask more questions, and they'll be back there for about 30 minutes. So thank you again for attending. And in a couple minutes, we'll start our next panel, which is Stories to Die For. It's a young adult panel about thrillers. And thank you again.